Welcome back to Phyto Revival, the podcast, where wisdom is always steeping, laughter is our favorite medicine, and our lived experiences are what root us in our humanity. I am your host, Dezaraé Haley. So now that I'm settled here in Kentucky, I decided that it was time for me to revamp the podcast, and I have done a lot of self-reflection. And upon my reflection, I started thinking about how does someone know that they've outgrown their environment, especially since we are so conditioned to just accept things as they are as a child? So today, I want to talk about your environment and how do you know if it's really for you? There are a lot of times that people will assume something is wrong with them, that they're doing something wrong, when in reality, they've just outgrown the environment that they've gotten comfortable in. And before I share a little bit of my story and we start to get deep in the human side of things, let's take a moment and think about our plant buddies. How do you know when a plant has outgrown its environment or the environment is no longer what is optimal for thriving? So I'm going to take a moment and talk about what it means to be root bound, to have transplant shock, and to just not be in the right environment altogether. So when you were talking about our plant buddies, when they start to look yellow, moody, droopy, just not thriving, it's often because, well, it may be root bound. And this is just one of the ways that the environment can affect the plant. So being root bound means that there's no room left for the pot for the growth of the plant. So the roots have taken up all the available space. And when this happens, the plants dry out faster because there's less soil volume to retain the water. The roots start circling and strangling themselves, wrapping around the inside of the pot looking for somewhere to go, but there's nowhere left. And the nutrient uptake becomes inefficient, even if there is fertilizer present. The plant isn't dying because it's weak. It's struggling because there's no room left to expand. And that often happens to us as humans, where our environment isn't letting us grow and we start having depression and anxiety of trying to fit in, but just not feeling like it's the right place for you. Another area is transplant shock. I mean, have you ever grown, say, tomato plants from seeds and then tried to transplant them and the next day they look like they've completely given up on life? Yeah, me too. I mean, we're not born plant experts. In fact, we're not born an expert in anything. Well, this lack of life looking plant the next day is actually a sign that it's in shock. And transplant shock happens when a plant didn't acclimate to its new environment before being expected to survive in it. So imagine me, a pale little redhead, being teleported to southern Mexico and being told, hey, go survive, good luck. I'd be dehydrated and sunburnt real quick. And that's the same for plants. The greenhouse is like Northern Europe, and outside is Mexico. That's why we use a technique called hardening off plants, which is just a fancy way of saying that we acclimate them slowly. Transplant shock can be caused by root disturbance or damage, sudden light intensity changes, temperature swings, wind exposure, and water imbalance. So if you've never heard of hardening off your plants before, essentially you're going to take 7 to 10 days and you're going to take your little seedling plant that you had grown and you're going to go put it under a shade tree. And then you're going to bring it in at night. And then you're going to do that again the next day. And then you're going to move it to a part sun, part shade environment. And you're going to only bring it inside at night for about the first 4 nights. Then after that, you're going to leave it outside for the rest of the week. And then after that week, you can go on ahead and transplant it. And what this is actually doing is that it is actually changing the cells inside of the plant to be able to withstand the changes of the environment. Because when a plant is suddenly exposed to harsh elements, the roots release a stress hormone called ABA, abscisic acid. This signals the guard cells in the plant to close the stomata, slowing gas exchange and conserving water, essentially putting the growth on pause. Sometimes that stress response is so strong that most or all of the plant will die. Soil depletion is another sign that a plant has outgrown its environment, especially indoor plants. Over time, nutrients get used up or washed away. And when you have plants inside, they don't have the raw organic material like dead leaves and grass and animals or feces from animals to help refertilize the soil. So when your indoor plant starts showing signs of yellowing leaves, stunted growth, and weak stems, the plant isn't failing. The soil is depleted. And there's also the issue of native versus non-native environments. Plants not grown in their native ecosystems can struggle with improper soil, climate, and light. Or on the flip side, they may naturalize so aggressively that they disrupt the established ecosystem. Supportive ecosystems consistent of plants that evolve together, balanced, diverse, and resilient. Invasive ecosystems are dominated by species without natural controls, creating monocultures that crowd out everything else. And when I started thinking about all of this, I realized how deeply paralleled a plant outgrowing its environment is to a human that has outgrown theirs. As a child, I was the oldest and the calmest of my siblings. Whether I realized it or not, I was leaned on heavily to help keep balance in the home. A lot of times that meant that my voice was quiet. It got snuffed out. Not because I didn't have one, but because the silence kept the peace faster when chaos had already been heavy and exhausting. There was enough conflict in the environment, I didn't need to add to it. So when you grow up learning to shrink yourself to calm a room, that doesn't just stay in childhood. It follows you. It becomes a habit you carry into friendships, workplaces, and relationships. The skills we learn to survive childhood often require us to hide parts of ourselves that might disrupt our environment. We learn to conform for survival. But one day, you're not a child anymore, and you're an adult. And you're expected to lead. But your whole life, you've been shrinking. And for me, this shift began when I left for the Army at the age of 17, stepping into a world I didn't fully understand outside my home, school, and social circles. Since elementary school, I had always been labeled the quiet one, the nice one, the one people underestimated. But looking back, I realized it wasn't my full self. It was just the part of me that I had learned not to be seen yet. And after enduring traumatic experiences in the military, my mental health declined quickly. Negative self-talk, self-humiliation, those lived rent-free in my mind. And in 2003, at 19 years old, I was only 103 pounds. I was placed on 200 milligrams of Zoloft. For those of you that don't know, that is a very, very high dose, not only for my stature, but for a starting dose. For more than a decade, I felt like a zombie, Yet I still had low self-esteem, low confidence, high anxiety, and a deep depression that would come and go for no reason at all. With my husband's support and the help of mental health services at the VA, I made the decision in 2023 to come off all psychiatric medications. It's now 2026. And I want to be honest, that journey has not been easy. I still experience flashes of memory while large portions of my trauma remain inaccessible. But as my mind began clearing, I started seeing things differently. I began recognizing how often I've been taken advantage of, how deeply misunderstood I was, and how my loneliness made me crave connection so badly that I attached to people who only wanted access to parts of my life. Not me, not as a whole person. I began learning that I don't have to have the last word, that I don't have to explain myself to anyone, and I don't have to defend myself to people who have no desire to love or understand me. If someone hears a rumor about you and repeats it without speaking to you first, it's because it aligns with what they already wanted to believe. Because respect was present, conversation would have came first. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that many people show you who they are through their actions. While their mouth, their words are still telling you a different story. They're telling you what they think that you want to hear so they could keep the attachment. So when someone's actions and words don't line up, that is a really big tell that that person is most likely there for access, not connection. And I had to face the hard truth. I trusted environments in my teens, young adulthood, and even my adulthood that were never designed to hold me. I survived things that most people wouldn't have. And healing brain chemistry alone after coming off of medications like Zoloft can take months and even years. And as my mind became more clear, I noticed something else. It has become harder to give people access to my life. But that's because I require something different now. I value respect and genuine connection over superficial outings and popularity. I realized I wanted more than the spaces that I was in. I wasn't living, I was surviving, like a plant in the pot, too small for its roots. I found myself craving authenticity, integrity, honesty, communication, accountability, loyalty, and transparency. And when I looked around, I realized that the environment that I was rooted in reflected the opposite, stunting my growth and asking me to stay small for the comfort of others. So since moving to Kentucky, I've been intentionally retraining my mind, relearning how I respond to conflict, disrespect, and misalignment, and teaching myself that I am not going to shrink because someone else is uncomfortable. I am not going to tolerate disrespect for the sake of peace, and understanding that if my boundaries in certain relationships, then that's what has to happen for me to live authentically. There are so many parallels between humans who have outgrown their environment and plants that have outgrown their pot. And signs for you to look for are you in persistent stress? Do you feel isolated? Are you emotionally exhausted? Have you noticed that kind of feels like people take advantage of you, that your boundaries are poor, that you tend to neglect your personal needs? Because growth requires energy. And if all of your energy is going towards survival, then there is none left for you to expand with. I want you to just take a deep breath and really ask yourself, are the people in your environment and the community that you're in, are these people actually looking for connection with you? Or are they just looking for access to the parts of you that they find valuable? If today's episode resonated with you, I invite you to sit with a few reflection questions. So get out your journal or a piece of paper and take some time answering these. The first question: when do I notice myself becoming quiet, small, or agreeable out of habit rather than authenticity? Number 2, do I feel energized or drained by the environments I spend the most of my time in? And number 3, have I mistaken access for connection? I am so grateful you spent the time here with me today. And until next time, please remember, sometimes even a flower that requires full sun finds itself growing in the shade. Be mindful of the environments you're rooted in and make sure you have what you truly need to thrive.